Sir, please. Sir, please start.
Yeah. Prashant sir, shall we start, sir?
Yeah, sure.
Good evening, doctors. On behalf of Alchem Laboratories, India's fifth largest pharmaceutical company, I am Balaji, DSM for Alchem Aspiria Division. Take great pleasure in welcoming all the eminent doctors who have joined us for today's panel discussion. Doctor, today's panel discussion will be on vildagliptin, titled Views on Vildagliptin. Doctor, at Alchem, it has always been our endeavor to partner with healthcare professionals, and we will continue to do so even in this challenging time. With me to navigate this entire meeting, we have with us today Dr. Prachar Mapa sir, Senior Consultant Endocrinologist, who will be our moderator for today's panel discussion. Welcome.
Balaji, I think your voice is not clear, and I don't know if it is same for everybody.
It's a bit low.
Sir, I'm audible.
No, sir, it is not coming. Try to connect headphone.
Okay, yeah, I'll do that.
Yeah, Deepak, am I audible?
Yes, sir. Please disconnect from your mobile.
Yeah. Am I audible?
Yeah, Balaji, your voice is echoing. I think you're connected on two devices, probably because of that. Or
No, I disconnected, sir. Yeah, Deepak, am I audible?
Sir, you're audible, but your voice is not clear. It's converting into the slightly in a robotic way. Can you use the headphone? It is possible. You're on mute now.
I'll do it, Deepak. 1 second. Yeah, Deepak, am I audible now?
Sorry? Echo is coming.
Yeah, Deepak, is it okay now?
Yeah, audio is coming now.
Okay.
It's much better.
Okay. Sorry, sir. I'll just give once again the opening part. So, sorry for the inconvenience, sir. Yeah. Let me take this opportunity to welcome all the eminent doctors who have joined us for today's panel discussion. Now, today's panel discussion will be on vildagliptin, titled Views on Vildagliptin. Doctor, at Alkem, it has always been our endeavor to partner with healthcare professionals, and we will continue to do so even in these challenging times. To help us to navigate through the entire meeting, we have with us today Dr. Prashant Mapa, sir, Senior Consultant Endocrinologist, who will be our chairperson for today's webinar. Let me take this opportunity to give a short introduction about Dr. Prashant, sir. Dr. Prashant, sir, is a Senior Consultant Endocrinologist who is currently practicing at Kannur at Endo Diab Clinic. Doctor was a former associate professor at Kannur Medical College. Doctor has got close to 16 years of clinical experience in the field of endocrinology. Doctor has completed his MBBS from Government Medical College, Coimbatore, and he has done his post-graduation MD at Nair Hospital, Mumbai, and super specialty DM endocrinology at Kim Hospital, Mumbai. Doctor has trained in radioimmunoassay and clinical applications from BARC, Mumbai. Doctor has got several oral presentations, two oral presentation at APPES meeting 2004 at Kobe, Japan. And also Doctor has got an oral presentation at Endo 2006 at Boston. And Doctor has got 5 publications in indexed journals. His primary areas of interest are thyroid disorders and pediatric endocrinologists. With this short introduction, I once again welcome Dr. Prashant, sir. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Balaji.
Let me take this opportunity to welcome all the eminent panelists who have joined us for today's panel discussion. Let me take this opportunity to welcome firstly Dr. Rajiv, sir. Dr. Rajiv, sir, is a senior consultant cardiologist who is currently practicing at Calicut. Doctor is the head of the Department of Cardiology at Kozhikode District Cooperative Hospital, Calicut. Welcome, Rajiv, sir.
Thank you. By the time कल क्या वो सेशन भी है, कल सैटरडे है, फिर उसके बाद में भी कल थोड़े ज्यादा सेशन लाइन अप इसी उनको भी शामिल करते हैं.
Let me take this opportunity to welcome the next panelist, Dr. Rajesh, sir. Dr. Rajesh, sir, is a senior consultant diabetologist who is practicing at PVS Hospital, Calicut. Doctor has done his MBBS in the year 2000 at Government Medical College, Calicut, and post-graduation in the year 2004 at University of Calicut. And he has done his DNB as well in 2005 and MRCP in the year 2011 and FRCP in the year 2020. Doctor has got 17 years of clinical experience in the field of medicine and diabetology. The doctor is currently associated with PVS Hospital, Calicut. With this short introduction, I welcome Dr. Rajesh, sir. Welcome, sir.
Okay, so shall I shut down your laptop?
Let me take this opportunity to welcome the next panelist, Dr. MV Biju, sir. MV Biju, sir, is a senior consultant nephrologist who is currently practicing at Calicut District Cooperative Hospital. Doctor has done his MBBS in the year 1997 and post-graduation in the year 2007 from Kottayam Medical College. And now he is currently associated with the Cooperative Hospital, Calicut. Welcome, Biju, sir. Let me take this opportunity to welcome the next panelist, Dr. Neeraj, sir. Dr. Neeraj, sir, is a senior consultant physician and diabetologist who is currently associated with Calicut Medical College in the Department of Medicine as assistant professor. Doctor, primary areas of interest are diabetes, critical care medicine, and rheumatology. So, welcome, Neeraj, sir, for this panel discussion. So, with this short introduction of panelists, let me hand over the session to our moderator, Dr. Prashant, sir. Sir, you can set the context for the webinar, sir. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Balaji. Good evening, all. All friends and panel members. Today, we know that gliptins have been in the market for a very long time now. The first gliptin was introduced in, I think, 2006 for sitagliptin, which was followed quickly by vildagliptin. Then came saxagliptin, anagliptin, which is not still marketed in India, and then the linagliptin. Then we also have other gliptins which are present in the Indian market, which include teneligliptin, gemagliptin, and evogliptin. So we have a lot of gliptins in the market, and we know that few of these gliptins have many patients who have been studied both in cardiovascular as well as non-cardiovascular studies. And among the gliptins we have, which have been put in, which have studies with maximum number of patients, would be sitagliptin, vildagliptin, and linagliptin. What we will do for the next 40 minutes or so is try to look at the role of vildagliptin, both as a gliptin in the the management of diabetes and its associated. When we are looking at associated comorbidities, and also look at vildagliptin compared to probably other gliptins also. So for discussion, we have a very eminent panel of senior doctors, which include two well-known senior physicians and diabetologists, a cardiologist and a nephrologist, and hope we'll have a very good time over the next 40 minutes. To put in context, let me first, I think I'll direct my question to all the panelists, and you can give your views. And if anybody from the audience has any questions, it will be answered by all the panelists. You can put give the questions in the chat box. So the first thing, what we know that any patient with type 2 diabetes, when we put them on an oral anti-diabetic drug, they start failing over a period of time. Most of them, we know that if you start on a single oral anti-diabetic drug, then the UKPDS study did show that almost 50% of these patients fail by 3 years, and by 9 years, 75% of the patients are not controlled with that single oral agent. They have to be put on oral agent, another oral agent. So one of the studies which actually thought that starting on a single oral agent and then increasing the dose and finally putting on a second oral agent, there is a sequential therapy or a early combination therapy, which was better, was the VERIFY trial. This was one of the first trials to show the long-term benefits of glycemic durability of an early combination therapy compared to a single agent. And the study drug was metformin alone or metformin plus vildagliptin. And then which also showed that instead of an early combination therapy, sequential therapy is much worse than an early combination therapy. So with this study in mind, let me go to the first question. I think I'll first ask Dr. Rajesh. Given the progressive nature of newly diagnosed type 2 diabetes, how do you view combination therapy as a strategy in optimization of early diabetes management in the with the background of the VERIFY trial?
Thank you, Doctor, for for starting with me. I'll just, I think as we are all aware, diabetes is a progressive disease. So over the years, beta cells are bound to fail. So the earlier concept was like you start a drug, and once you fail, you start the next drug. Or broadly speaking, it is treat to fail. So you treat, you fail, you add the next drug. So VERIFY trial has just put out some interesting data. So what they did is they started one arm with metformin and the other arm with Vilda with metformin. And then, so those patients who failed on metformin, they added the next drug in one arm, and the next arm, they continue with Vilda with metformin. It was actually an international study, including 34 countries. And among the Asian countries, actually 50% of the data came from India. So what was observed is if you start early on in combination therapy, in fact, the time, the requirement for a second therapy was reduced by almost 50%. Like the initial treatment with an Vilda with metformin, they reduced the requirement for the second therapy by almost 50%. So I think it's always better to start with a combination, and the VERIFY trial has given us data on the combination early treatment of Vilda with metformin. I think even some guidelines also recommend that if you have a A1C of more than 7.5, probably you can straight away start with a combination therapy.
Dr. Neeraj, if you are around, can you please give your views? Okay. I think Neeraj is in mute. Dr. Rajiv, as a cardiologist, now we know that many drugs, some of the drugs are more prescribed by cardiologists than by physicians. But leaving aside SGLT2 inhibitors, which came recently to the market, how do you think of the role of vildagliptin in combination with metformin compared to in the initial therapy of type 2 diabetes?
Thank you. The gliptins are now an established therapy in treatment of diabetes. That is very well established. And as you know, all drugs now require cardiovascular safety and cardiovascular outcome trials, and also they need follow-up. So in that aspect, any drug which has to be given for diabetes, has to be studied or has to be given, has to pass the big hurdle of cardiovascular safety. Now, unfortunately, many drugs failed to show a cardiovascular benefit. That is possibly the only drug which has maximum cardiovascular benefit in the diabetology armamentarium, is we all know SGLT2. That's apart. We put it apart. Other than that, whenever we think of adding multiple drugs to diabetic treatment, yes, it is a very established fact that combination therapy is needed to most of the patients, and it is better, as Dr. Rajesh has said, it is better to start on early with combination because they have better long-term effects. But now, from a cardiovascular point of view, what is the negative side of combination therapy is always the chance of hypoglycemia. See, when you combine drugs like sulfonylurea with insulins or other drugs, the chance of hypoglycemia is significant. So this is one area of advantage where DPP-4 inhibitors have some superiority over other combinations. By adding vildagliptin to metformin, which has both efficacy is better, as well as the safety profile, as well as hypoglycemia is less. Now, why I am concerned about hypoglycemia is because it is an accepted fact that hypoglycemia is an independent predictor of adverse cardiovascular events and outcomes, including mortality. So I would say combining with a gliptin is effective as well as safe in that aspect.
Thank you, Dr. Rajiv. Dr. Biju, any comments from your side as a nephrologist?
Thank you. Regarding gliptins, the oral anti-diabetic drugs in CKD with the reduced GFR, the problems are side effects are more if used by metformin, chant for acidosis, all of you know. That is the problem. We cannot increase the titration of the dose of the metformin, difficulty in advanced renal failure, and you have to avoid in advanced stages many times. Nowadays, there are a lot of studies saying that lactic acidosis is less, but still in our clinical practice, we are seeing lactic acidosis. So, regarding sulfonylurea, the problem is with hypoglycemia and with reduced GFR is well established. So, in that case, gliptins, the less chance for hypoglycemia is a very advantage to the CKD patient with the reduced reduced GFR. They are safe. Many times other anti-diabetic drugs we cannot use. In that case, we can use gliptins like vildagliptins. Okay.
Thank you, Biju. I think Neeraj is not still here, so we'll go to the second part. We basically when we go along the progression of diabetes mellitus, initially as a sequential therapy, we used to usually start with metformin, then add on another drug, then it fails, then you add on a third drug, and it's like that. But we know that all this results in a long period of time that the patient spends in hyperglycemia, which which actually makes the patient more prone to the complications of diabetes, especially the microvascular complications of diabetes. So, as shown in the Verify trial, we know that early combination therapy does decrease the chance of both primary as well as secondary failure. What is the role? I mean, but most of our patients, they come a little bit late in present. At least for specialists, they come a little bit late when they at least fail on 1 or 2 drugs. So, what is the role of vildagliptin when you add on to any other drug? So, suppose the patient is not on metformin, sulfonylureas or DPP for to SGLT2 inhibitors, pioglitazone. Are there any studies which show that they are still effective at any stage of diabetes in combination with any other oral antidiabetic? Dr. Rajesh.
Yes, as it was rightly said, I think diabetes is progressive, and by the time we diagnose diabetes, almost 50 to 80% of the beta cells has already been exhausted, and so even by the time you diagnose, it's already late. So there is nothing called early combination or early treatment. So we are already late. By the time we diagnose, it's already 50 to 80% of the beta cells is exhausted, and most of them have micro or macrovascular complications. So the EDGE study has definitely shown that EDGE study had which studied the combination of vildagliptin with other drugs as well as the other OAD combinations, and it was a comparative real-world study over 1 year. And it actually showed that the combination with vildagliptin was better off in reducing the HbA1c parameters with minimum of the side effects or adverse events when compared with the other combinations. And in fact, even the Verify trial has shown that by using of the early combination of vildagliptin has in fact reduced the microvascular complications in the Indian scenario by almost 39% and macrovascular by almost 29%. So definitely combination therapy is better, and vildagliptin based combinations have slight edge as shown in the EDGE study.
Thank you, Rajesh. Dr. Neeraj, Balaji, is Dr. Neeraj there? Okay. So there are studies which have shown actually that as an add-on therapy too, because many times our patients, Indian patients, they are already on a metformin plus sulfonylurea, and then they come to us. And even in these patients, there are a multitude of studies which show that the gliptins, especially vildagliptin, is effective in lowering the HbA1c. We know that the HbA1c lowering of these newer agents are between 0.6 and 1, and it depends on the baseline HbA1c. The higher the HbA1c you have, the greater is the reduction. That's almost normal with all the anti-diabetic agents. So let us take this. We know that the drugs which are now in the market, which is proposed to be the first-line static agents, even without metformin, is the SGLT2 inhibitors because of its multitude of factors as regard to the benefits with cardiovascular system is concerned, or also as far as microalbuminuria and mild to moderate renal failure is concerned. It reduces the albumin levels. I have a lot of advantages. So in a patient, they are not very powerful agents. They do reduce the blood sugars. So so when you have an affording patient, the patient is already on an SGLT inhibitor, or a patient, do you think an addition of a DPP4 inhibitor, especially vildagliptin, will give an additional benefit to the patients? I'll first go to Dr. Rajiv, I think, because he'll be talking about SGLT2 inhibitors. So what is your view on it?
Yes, SGLT2 inhibitors, as we all know, they are not very potent glucose lowering agents per se. But when you add on to an existing regimen of a single drug or combination of oral anti-diabetic drugs, they have two things. One, they can three things. One, they can have a smaller amount of A1C reduction. rather than adding a potent second agent or third agent, less risk of hyperglycemia, and moreover, better cardiovascular outcomes in the form of reduced incidence of heart failure and cardiovascular mortality, and also lesser weight gain and possibly some weight loss. So from these aspects, adding SGLT2 inhibitors to DPP-4 the gliptins, I think they improve the cardiovascular outcomes. They have favorable effect on weight profile. But there is, it's too early to comment on SGLT2, even though we have so many data. I would request your viewpoint also on the so-called concept of hepatic glucose output, some paradox of glucagon secretion and SGLT2 mediated glucagon secretion and some hepatic glucose output. Whether it is in that aspect, whether it is combining DPP-4 with SGLT2, whether it is beneficial or is it neutral, I don't know. That is something which we can discuss. Anyway, overall, I feel that straight away starting as a first-line therapy with DPP-4 plus minus metformin and adding an SGLT2 is possibly currently the best agent as far as a cardiovascular, elderly with cardiovascular disease and vascular disease and for cardioprotection, that may be the best.
Dr. Biju, I think it is, another field where these drugs are more commonly used in mild to moderate renal failure. So what do you think of the combination of SGLT2 inhibitor with the inhibitors? What is their role as far as renal patients are concerned? I think there is a lot of disturbance coming from the netcast. Can you just mute that?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Definitely, SGLT inhibitors, prevention of progression of CKD. The role is established now, and combination will definitely improve the progression of kidney disease. When you take gliptins as such in prevention of CKD, the role is neutral, I think. But when we combine with SGLT2 inhibitors with gliptins, definitely it will help in the progression of kidney disease, regression of reversal of or regression of proteinuria. It may help. Okay, thank you.
Dr. Rajesh, is there any additional benefit of combining an SGLT2 inhibitor with a DPP-4 inhibitors like vildagliptin?
Yes, I think SGLT2 inhibitors definitely they have their place and they have shown their cardiovascular benefit and their additional benefit as well as apart from lowering the blood glucose, they also reduces the BP and other effects. But one concern which was shown is probably the glycosuria, which throws out the glucose from the body, could be theoretically compensated by the increase in the hepatic glucogenesis or the endogenous glucose production. So it was thought that probably if you reduce the endogenous glucose production by using another agent like a DPP-4 inhibitor, the effect could be more than additive. That could be one additional benefit. And the other thing, I think possibly as far as the cardiovascular risk is concerned, apart from the glycemic load and its effect on the cardiovascular risk, the weight as such is an additional cardiovascular risk apart from the glycemic status. So any drug which reduces the glycemic load and the weight definitely has an advantage. So SGLT2 reduces the weight on its own, and DPP inhibitor probably weight neutral or some amount of weight loss. So the combination could definitely give us an additional weight loss and probably could be more beneficial. And the effect of an endogenous increase in glucose production by the SGLT can be compensated by the DPP-4 inhibitor as well.
As rightly pointed out, what is seen from studies is when the HbA1c is quite high, the SGLT2 inhibitors are actually very much more effective in reducing the sugars. But when the HbA1c comes more near the target of the thing, they are less efficacious. One of the reasons they tell is again because of the amount of endogenous glucose production by the which is increased by the SGLT2 inhibitors. At the same time, we know that the DP4 inhibitors, the main mechanism of action is not only increasing the beta cell secretion of insulin, but the another common mode of action is the suppression of the glucagon secretion from the alpha cells, which is responsible for the endogenous glucose production. So a combination of these agents will be effective in probably in all ranges of hyperglycemia. When you have high blood sugars, probably the SGLT2s are more effective. When the sugars become more close to target, the vildagliptin may be more effective. So in any patient, especially because of the additional benefit of probably decrease in the decrease in weight, as mentioned by Dr. Rajesh, the cardiovascular benefits are maybe increased even little more additionally. Though the initial studies with DPP4 inhibitors, that is the animal studies, did show that they might be having a lot of cardiovascular benefit, but the clinical trials, the cardiovascular outcome trials actually have not, proved that fact. Though vildagliptin and at least sitagliptin, they are all at least neutral as far as the cardiovascular outcomes are concerned. So I think as a combination, this drug, even if you add on metformin, it would be a very good combination for reducing cardiovascular risk in patients with.
1 minute, sir. I'm just doing it.
The next part of the discussion is basically when we look at what we call elderly patients. We know that they are at risk for both cardiac problems as well as for renal problems. So when you have a patient, elderly diabetic patient who's presenting with uncontrolled sugars, in your opinion, Dr. Raji, what would be the first choice of drug to be used?
Yeah, the elderly population, the importance is that most of them have significant comorbid conditions like cardiovascular disease, renal disease. So in these patients, it is very, very essential that we use agents which are cardioprotective, which have mortality benefits and morbidity benefits. So in that perspective, again, in vascular protection or in reducing heart failure, all this pleiotropic effects, I would say the best agents would be combining DPP4 with SGLT2. Now, as we know, the A1C reduction, if a patient has a baseline A1C which is very high, we may have to add further therapy with it. But again, combining too many drugs, we all know, has the risk of hypoglycemia also. In that aspect also, I think SGLT2 inhibition as well as CB4 combination will do good. So in my practice, I think I have almost replaced initiating with the sulfonylurea, which was a standard practice earlier, to a combination of metformin with DPP4 and adding on SGLT2 down the course of time, even if the patient does not have heart failure. But a substrate for heart failure like hypertension, all these patients, they do well in clinical follow-up. Again, the data, if you ask me per se, the data for vascular protection and cardiovascular event reduction for vildagliptin as a gliptin, particularly compared, if you ask me, it is not huge, that we all know. That but there are small trials which have a few hundreds of patients which have shown vascular protection for vildagliptin. So overall, we can say that gliptins as a whole plus SGLT2 is probably a better choice for elderly also. And as I earlier mentioned, hypoglycemia is also a problem in elderly, so that is also taken care of.
I mean, if you, most of the trials, the cardiovascular outcome trials, most of the patients did have high risk for cardiovascular disease, or they already had a cardiovascular disease. You look at the SGLT2 inhibitor trials. So they constitute a lot of patients, but at least 50% of the patients, elderly patients who present with diabetes, may not have these risk factors. So in such cases, do you think a SGLT2 inhibitor would be better, or a gliptin would be better? The reason being that you know that SGLT inhibitors, they are not drugs without any adverse event. I mean, what would be a safer bet in such patients?
See, now the evidence for benefit of SGLT2 inhibitors are going beyond diabetes. So, from a cardiological point of view, we'll have data in heart failure. We'll have data in eventually we'll have some. I think we'll have data in heart failure with preferred ejection fraction also. So, but by and large, SGLT inhibition is it's not a very potent agent for diabetes control. So I think a patient who has no, as the question I understand is, who has no heart disease, who have not much risk of an established heart disease or developing a heart disease in the near future, if the baseline A1C is high, then DPP4 is the better choice to start with. But then I would always tilt my bias towards SGLT2 because the robust long-term beneficial effects, cardiovascular benefits, because the affordable long-term benefits are too good.
Dr. Biju, the same question to you. In an elderly patient who comes to you for mild renal failure, what would be your first choice of drugs? We know that SGLT2 inhibitors, basically they have a renal mechanism of action, while DPP4 inhibitors, they have a different mechanism of action. So would your first bet be on a DPP4 inhibitor or a SGLT2 inhibitor?
Many of my patients, elderly, associated with CKD. First, my priority is safe drug, less hypoglycemia, less side effects. In that regard, aspect, DPP4 inhibitor safe regarding less hypoglycemia, no hypoglycemia or less hypoglycemia compared to sulfonylurea, less side effects. So I prefer advanced stage gliptins in my one of the first line drug for or anti-diabetic drug. Regarding SGLT inhibitors in patient with all stages, especially in associated with the cardiac dysfunction, I prefer SGLT inhibitors in CKD patient with diabetes. So both drugs are safe in elderly CKD patients. Thank you.
Dr. Rajesh, your opinion, because we see a lot of elderly patients who come for the first time. So what would be your first choice, an SGLT2 inhibitor or a because you know now both of them, you have cheaper variants which are available. So what would you prefer? What would be what would look in your decision making?
Yes, I think the elderly with diabetes is increasing, and as far as the management is concerned, I think the more the number of years of the patient has already had diabetes, and the patient who already has developed the comorbidities, and his expected lifespan is less. In those cases, I think we need not go for a very stringent HbA1c control. Even though our target is 6.5 and ADS put it probably at 7, the American Diabetes and the Geriatric Society has probably put a higher A1C as the target in the geriatric population. So probably you can go up to 7.5 or maybe 8, because probably they are more concerned of the hypoglycemia in the elderly than the other benefits. Because in an elderly, if the patient develops hypoglycemia, it could lead to falls, and falls in turn can lead to fractures and other complications. The patient can go on to develop dementia. Probably it could the chances of dementia could increase, and recurrent hypoglycemia in the elderly could probably lead to they could be more depressed, and the compliance to the treatment might be poor in case he develops more recurrent hypoglycemias. So the concern in elderly would probably be more on the hypoglycemic aspect. And I think I would prefer a DPP-4 inhibitor in the elderly as the choice.
Thank you, Rajesh. Basically, when you in practice, what happens is, unless you have a compelling indication to put them on SGLT2 inhibitors, for example, if the patient is obese, patient has high risk of cardiovascular disease. So in such patients, we should put them on SGLT2 inhibitors. But otherwise, we know that SGLT2 inhibitors, they cause glucosuria in elderly patients. They can lead to some sort of dehydration, some electrolyte disturbances. So, and definitely they require some monitoring. But when you use a DPP-4 inhibitors, any of the DPP-4 inhibitors, the need for monitoring is very little. For a normal patient, elderly patient, I would prefer a DPP-4 inhibitor unless there is a compelling indication to put them on an SGLT2 inhibitor. Rajesh, another very question is that we have many DPP-4 inhibitors from sitagliptin to our teneligliptin. So, is there any preference of one agent over the other? Are there any studies which compare these gliptins, or are there any mechanistic differences between these gliptins? Or where do we, use a particular gliptin over the other?
Is it to me?
Yeah, Rajesh, first.
Okay. So I think probably as far as the renal concern, probably you have the linagliptin from the Carolina and Carmelina trials. But when it comes to the DPP-4 inhibition, actually the vildagliptin acts by substrate inhibition, by a covalent bonding. Whereas the other gliptins like the sita and lina acts by the so-called the competitive inhibition. So the binding of the other gliptins like the sita and the lina lasts for almost less than 30 to 50 seconds. Whereas the binding for vilda by covalent bonding lasts for around 55 to 55 minutes or to 1 hour. And so it's a strong bonding. And your DPP-4 inhibition is almost 90-95%. And even at the end of 24 hours, it lasts around 70 to 80% in case of vilda. You also have a similar advantage with sitagliptin. So probably these two have the maximum of the DPP-4 inhibition when compared to the other gliptins.
Actually, there are some studies which compare the glycemic variability between vildagliptin and sitagliptin. You have any comments on those studies?
I think the glycemic excursions are also less with vilda when compared to sitagliptin. When they are used at a comparative dose of maybe 50 milligram BD of vilda and 100 of sita, the glycemic excursions are probably less with vilda. And I think nowadays, because earlier our target was to control the fasting FBS, PPBS, and HbA1c, and we have added additional targets right now. So we need to decrease the glycemic variability as well. So in those aspects, probably vilda scores over the other gliptins.
Because there are only few studies comparing gliptin to a gliptin, and there are 1 or 2 studies I think which you got where vildagliptin, we know the glycemic variability with gliptin is less than with sitagliptin, and both as cardiologists or nephrologists, we know that other than the glycemic control or the HbA1c fasting and postprandial, the fourth thing is the glycemic variability. So even if you have good HbA1c with very bad glycemic variability, you are more prone for complication. These are, results of the recent studies. And I think, Dr. Rajiv, if a patient has glycemic variability, and if you want to choose a gliptin, what would be your choices?
Again, the question of selecting which gliptin always amongst themselves, it is a very tricky one. See, there is the concept of, it is all by acting by the same mechanism. So theoretically, all should be similar. But then again, there are minor differences. The same thing happens whenever we talk about ARBs. Whenever we say in heart failure, the best drug is valsartan. In hypertension, the most effective and studied one is telmisartan. So likewise. But then again, people ask, then why? They are all same mechanism. Why do you say the difference? Again, we have to come to the trial data, whichever has the better trial data. So we stick to that scientifically. But again, I see the best people to assess the efficacy and variability would be endocrinologists and physicians, rather than me to say that variability and efficacy. But I will put in another aspect. See, from my side, see the cardiovascular safety outcome trials. See, when initially when I think alogliptin and saxagliptin had some dimmer statistics for cardiovascular outcome, it actually all this was way back in 2008 and 9, in the initial when the CVOT trial started. The whole thing produced a cloud of doubt over gliptins, not just one gliptin, actually all gliptin, and later FDA put a detailed investigation into those drugs, and what they concluded was that these trials, when looked independently, individually, it doesn't say that this Saxa and Alo are the ones which can have a little worse cardiovascular outcome. They said it is as a class we should expect them to have a little adverse events. So they are possibly at par, not better. So whenever we, with whatever data we have with all gliptins, my concept is, see, all of them are essentially acting to the same mechanism, and we should see as a whole similar. That's my personal viewpoint. And second thing, at that point, see, to selection comes to convenience of dosing, say once daily dosing or longer acting, and then cost. As these things matter when you pick an agent. So my viewpoint in this is not minor nuances like better efficacy over one another, glycemic variability, bioavailability, all this put apart. All these are possibly the same class of agents.
Thank you, Rajiv. Dr. Biju, do you have any choice with regard to a particular gliptin when you are prescribing a gliptin as far as renal conditions are concerned?
Renal kidney patients, theoretically, linagliptin is metabolized by enterohepatic circulation, so that linagliptin don't need for renal dose modification in patient with the renal failure. That is a theoretical benefit. But I consider all these gliptins same, almost same. So I prefer depend on the patient's capacity and the price of the gliptin tablets. Okay, thank you.
So initially, it was like that. That is when we put a patient. All the gliptins were very costly. Linagliptin was, I mean, all are in the same price group. So once you have renal failure, some of the drugs need dose reduction. So immediately the price of the drug will go into half. So you can prefer the drug because, for example, if you have severe renal failure, I mean, you can give only 25 milligram of sitagliptin. So the price becomes 1/4. So that was one advantage. Now, because the prices decrease, I don't know whether, I mean, that is actually an advantage. Anyway, we all know that linagliptin requires a dose reduction in moderate to severe renal failure by 50%. While linagliptin does not require a dose reduction. All the gliptins, only, I mean, maybe telinagliptin does not require a dose reduction. Most of the other gliptins require a dose reduction depending upon the, I mean, the stage of renal failure. Now, other than the older patient, the next point of discussion is the role of the vildagliptin post-patent. We know that the cost of treatment initially was very high. It was around 40 to 50 rupees per day, and this shifted to 10 to 12 rupees per day after the patent is expired. So if you look at the cost per year, from 16,500 per year, it has dropped to around 4,000 per year, which is almost 1/3 of the original cost. So what is, I mean, everybody, it's a question to all. With the evidence-based vildagliptin gone off patent, the generic variants have flooded the market, resulting in a sharp drop in prices. what would, in your view, be the expanded role of economic and evidence-based vildagliptin in the spectrum of patients with type 2 diabetes mellitus? So, Dr. Rajesh, I'll give it to you first.
Yeah, of course, because gliptin as such, the DPP4 inhibitors has a wide role because I think it addresses many of the pathological aspects of diabetes, unlike other drugs. So it probably addresses the beta cell, the alpha cell, the GLP-1 receptor level, the satiety aspect. So probably most of the aspects in the pathophysiology of diabetes is addressed by the DPP4, except probably the renal reabsorption, which is taken care of by the SGLT2 inhibitor. So DPP4 inhibitors have a role, and our main constraint till some time back was the cost of the DPP4 inhibitors. And since it's coming down, I think the usage of DPP4 inhibitors, especially the vildagliptin, which has gone off patent, and the cost has come down drastically. So I think the usage would probably be more. And I think one disadvantage with which the vildagliptin had was probably the twice daily usage. I think some of them are coming out with an extended release preparation of vildagliptin. It's 100 milligram once daily. So probably that also could be an encouraging aspect.
And the add-on to the question, with this lowering of price of vildagliptin, and do you think sulfonylureas are slowly going out of the market?
I don't think so. Probably, the usage has come down, but they're not going out. Actually, probably the Carolina trial has given some hope to the glimepiride again. They compared it with linagliptin to show the superiority of linagliptin, but in turn, actually, it was advantageous to the glimepiride, in fact. So I think it might go on, but many of the prescription will change from sulfonylurea to DPP4 inhibitor.
Dr. Rajiv, your views on this cost benefit of vildagliptin? Yes, definitely. I agree to the viewpoint that now once this patency is over, now we have an affordable gliptin which is well studied, which is in real world, which has more than 10 years. It has been in use in Europe and Japan. So this is in China. All this it is Vilda. I think it is more than 10 years real world experience is there. So we have a very well tried gliptin at an affordable cost. Definitely, it will change the practice, the day-to-day practice in diabetes. But then, will sulfonylurea go out? I don't think so, because as far as diabetes is a real pandemic, and you have so many of those patients who have a significant diabetes and its burden. So I think any drug, diabetic drug, may not go out of practice. Definitely, they will have a role. But it is very, very welcome to see that vildagliptin is out of patent. It's a very cost-effective treatment, and it has my choice of agents also. It has affected this cost reduction. Then one thing I just wanted to ask your opinion, since Dr. Rajesh was just mentioned, is it adequate that this 100 milligram once daily? Dr. Prashant also, what's your opinion? It is as good as giving 50 milligram twice daily. Is there any concerns when you make it once daily?
In fact, I was asking all the companies who have come up with this once daily to give some evidence regarding how it's effective, because we know that once you reach the peak concentration of the drug in the plasma, it inhibits 80% of the DPP4 activity. But this giving a sustained release formulation of vildagliptin, I don't know how it's going to be helpful. So all the companies have one data to show that they have some DPP4 inhibitor, but none of them have provided the proper evidence. So I'm not very sure about the once daily preparation, probably because it is now being used. After some time, you might get data regarding that, but mechanistically, I don't have any idea of it. Rajesh?
Yeah, as rightly pointed out, I think whether it reaches the peak to reach the maximum DPP4 inhibition, I think we need to wait for the trials to come. It's only as far as the compliance part, maybe it would be beneficial. But as far as whether it reaches the peak and causes maximum DPP4 inhibition, I think we'll have to wait and see.
Dr. Biju, the last point, regarding the cost efficacy of vildagliptin presently.
As the cost is dramatically reduced now, this DP4 inhibitor may be first line in elderly CKD patients and patients with other comorbidities, chance for hypoglycemic patients. So maybe first line drug. And in other patients, the role is add-on therapy to other drugs is going to definitely increase gliptin regarding gliptin's use. Thank you.
Just let me ask you that, see, since this pertains to this question, see, now we will see in few months of time, the sitagliptin also going out of patent. So at that situation, if you have sitagliptin and vildagliptin and more gliptins at affordable cost, how would you select gliptin? It's to Dr. Prashant and Dr. Rajesh. Your personal views.
You have to go through citing the number of patients who've been, I think, total number of patients maybe with sitagliptin is more than vildagliptin, but we know that because vildagliptin has not got a US patent, I don't think they have played. So that is one problem with vildagliptin. Otherwise, if you look at CV outcome studies, you don't have one with vildagliptin. That's another disadvantage with vildagliptin. But I think if you look at by the time sitagliptin goes out of the market, so many people would have used vildagliptin that we would have enough real world data to show which is better. It's not better, at least they are equivalent, if not better. So presently, I don't know. I don't have a particular preference for a gliptin. It is more regarding. One was actually the cost, and then when the patient comes to you, you have a choice. Sometimes you give them the choice and then take it. Because sometimes you have a patient who comes from the Gulf, so we definitely wouldn't prefer a teneligliptin because it may not be available there. So we then would go for a sita or a vildagliptin. It is more easily available. Rajesh, your views?
Yeah, definitely. I think now it's because of it, that is the first drug which has gone off patent, and that's widely available at cheap price. So most of the prescription now goes around vildagliptin. So it's a pertinent question whether when more of DP4 inhibitors goes out of patent and you have a wide choice which are cheap, so probably you will have to wait and see. Probably like in a renal patients, probably you can go for a linagliptin as such. I think because the FDA patent for vildagliptin is awaited, I think they have not concentrated more on adding the high risk cardiovascular groups in most of the studies. That is the reason probably they have not got the FDA patent, but it's approved by the European Union.
I think we've almost an hour since we have started this discussion. I don't know whether there are any questions from the audience. Balaji, are you? Yeah.
Yeah, sir, there was only one question on once daily formulation, but that has been addressed by all the panelists. So all other, I think all the other points of discussion has been completely covered by all the panelists. So that's why we didn't see much questions other than this, sir. So you can give your conclusion remarks, sir.
So I think Dr. Biju, you wanted to add something?
Of cardiac failure gliptins. Decompensation of cardiac failure.
Dr. Rajiv.
We should always see in all these outcome trials, cardiovascular outcome trials, as I said, apart from the SGLT2, all others have to be looked into with a little suspicion. So all these trials have shown all this, even though these trials which are designed for superiority, finally ended up with non-inferiority parameters. So whenever we have a patient who has established heart failure, whose risk of heart failure has with a worsening of heart failure, and the patient is on a drug, a diabetic drug, then we should always think of that drug causing some damage, at least in a few. But by and large, in majority, we know it is neutral or safe. But then I would always say, if you have a patient who has worsening heart failure, and if you feel gliptin is the cause, you may have to down titrate it sometimes.
So I think if no other questions, I think we can conclude. We had a very, very enlightening session. If all of you, I just invite you for a concluding remarks before we close the session. Dr. Rajesh.
Yeah, I think DP4 inhibitors, because as was mentioned earlier, when it addresses most of the many of the pathological aspects of diabetes and has a very good role as far as the pathophysiology is concerned. And now, since the cost is coming down, probably we'll have more of usage of DPP4 inhibitors. And most of the guidelines also recommend an early combination at the starting of the early combination, because the ultimate goal is to prevent the cardiovascular and microvascular complications. So you need to get onto the target as early as possible.
And Dr. Rajeev.
Yeah, anyway, we have to welcome this idea of pharma industry with the drug going out of patent. You have a very robust competition with aggressive pricing, and we have this drug available to the masses at a very affordable cost. So that is a good thing that is happening, because all these drugs, all these long lifestyle diseases, what matters is compliance of treatment, and that is very important determinant for compliance is cost. So I think that's a very welcome thing, that reduction of cost. That's the biggest advantage.
Dr. Viju.
Definitely, gliptins has a role in CKD patients as a first-line drug or add-on therapy, and use will definitely increase. The choices gliptins, I think all are same. Linagliptin theoretically not better, but I think all are same regarding CKD patients with dose modification. Thank you.
Okay, so I would like to conclude by telling, if you look at the safest oral antidiabetic agent which is available, be it whatever the age, whatever the renal dysfunction, the best drug I think would be a gliptin, because you don't have to watch for many, monitor for other complications. So with the patent out for vildagliptin, I think with more and more experience, probably it would come to be the first choice while dealing with a patient, a de novo patient with diabetes as a starting agent. So with that, I think I will conclude. Thank you all, the esteemed panelists, for having a great discussion. I'll just hand over the mic back to Balaji.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Sir, before proposing the vote of thanks, I'll just like to highlight the latest developments on our Gluvilda OD, once daily formulation, which we are launched in the market. We are one of the earliest company to launch once daily formulation of vildagliptin in the Indian market. It is manufactured with the matrix technology, wherein DPP4 inhibition we had compared with the parent company 50 mg BD dosage, and we had done a trial for 3 months, wherein efficacy DPP4 inhibition is almost similar. 3 months data had shown a glycemic control which is similar to 50 mg BD of parent companies. And also we had done a bioequivalency study wherein our Gluvilda is matching up with the parent company. So it is bioequivalent to international brand. So these are the two highlighting points on Gluvilda and Gluvilda OD. So, sir, with this note, I'd like to propose the vote of thanks. So firstly, I'd like to thank moderator, Dr. Prashant sir, for accepting our invitation and moderating the panel discussion excellently today. You had completely covered all the points on vildagliptin, which will be more helpful for all the doctors who had attended today. So I'd like to thank all the eminent panelists who had accepted our invitation and shared your clinical experience on vildagliptin, which will be great input, and I'm sure all the doctors, delegates who had participated today we'll be appreciating the views which has been presented by all our panelists today. Sir, at this juncture, we like to salute all the doctors and paramedicals who have contributed immensely for keeping us all safe and healthy in these challenging times. Sir, we at Alkem will continue to serve doctors and patients by making our products available, especially our chronic brands, Gluvilda, Gipiros, and Volcom. So with this note, I'd like to thank once again, sir. Thanks for the opportunity. Good night, doctors.
Good night.
Right.